She was cornered, humiliated by her ex, and desperate enough to ask a terrifying stranger for the impossible. "Can you pretend to be my husband?" The man, a ruthless underworld boss who never did favors, looked at her trembling frame, smiled darkly, and replied, "Forever." But he wasn't joking. Penelope Hayes was a woman who knew how to manage a crisis. As the senior events director at the Drake Hotel in downtown Chicago, she spent her days putting out literal and metaphorical fires for high society elites. But no amount of professional poise could prepare her for the personal hell that was her sister Madison's upcoming wedding. The groom, the younger brother of Bradley Jenkins. Bradley was Penelope's ex-fiancé. He was a manipulative, sharp-tongued corporate lawyer who had broken their engagement 2 years prior, citing a cruel, shallow reason: her weight. Penelope was a size 20, a woman with soft, generous curves that Bradley had once claimed to love before his promotion to partner at Kirkland, and Ellis suddenly made him hyper-aware of corporate optics. He had dumped her for a Pilates instructor and never missed an opportunity to remind Penelope of her physical shortcomings at mandatory family gatherings. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon, just 4 days before the wedding. Penelope was inspecting the hotel's VIP lounge on the top floor, ensuring the catering was flawless for a private booking. She was mentally checking out when the heavy mahogany doors swung open. It wasn't the staff. It was Bradley. "Penny," Bradley sneered, leaning against the door frame in his sleek grey suit. His eyes did a slow, mocking sweep of her figure, lingering on her sensible black dress that did little to hide her full hips and stomach. "Still stress-eating your way through the hotel pantry, I see." Penelope's heart hammered against her ribs, a hot flush of shame and anger crawling up her neck. "Bradley, this is a private floor. You need to leave." "I'm meeting a client downstairs. Just thought I'd check in on the spinster of the hour," he said, stepping closer, trapping her near the marble buffet table. "Madison tells me you still don't have a +1 for Saturday." "Really, Penny? Going alone?" "Let me guess, you're just going to sit at the back and inhale the wedding cake while everyone pities you." Tears pricked Penelope's eyes. It was a juvenile insult, but after years of his emotional abuse, it hit exactly where it hurt. She wanted to scream, to shrink, to disappear entirely. "She won't be attending alone." The voice was low, gravelly, and carried an undeniable, bone-chilling authority. Both Penelope and Bradley whipped their heads around. Stepping out of the adjoining private cigar room was Matteo De Luca. Matteo was a ghost in the Chicago underworld, the head of the De Luca syndicate, though the public only knew him as a reclusive real estate magnate. He was entirely too tall, built like a heavyweight fighter, tailored into a custom black Brioni suit. His dark eyes were cold, calculating, and currently fixed on Bradley with the intensity of a predator sizing up a very weak prey. Penelope recognized him from the VIP registry, but she had never spoken to him. He was rumored to be dangerous, the kind of man who made federal agents sweat. But in that split second of sheer, blind panic, as Bradley looked at Matteo with a mixture of confusion and intimidation, Penelope's survival instinct overrode her common sense. She lunged forward, grabbing Matteo's thick, muscular forearm. His muscles went rigid under the expensive wool, but he didn't pull away. "He's right," Penelope blurted out, her voice shaking as she looked up at Matteo's chiseled, scarred jaw. She silently begged him with her eyes. "Please. I'm not going alone. Can you tell him? Can you pretend to be my husband?" It was a ludicrous request, a suicidal one, if she had stopped to think about who she was touching. Silence stretched in the luxurious room, thick and suffocating. Bradley let out a nervous scoff. "Husband? You, please, Penny, as if a guy like this would ever look twice at a... forever." The word cut through the air, silencing Bradley instantly. Matteo didn't just say it, he declared it. Slowly, deliberately, Matteo moved his arm, wrapping it securely around Penelope's thick waist and pulling her flush against his solid side. The warmth radiating from him was staggering. "I won't just pretend," Matteo continued, his Italian accent faintly bleeding through his perfect English as he stared Bradley down. "I am her husband, and if you ever speak to my wife with that tone again, they won't find enough of you left to fill a briefcase. Do you understand me?" The threat wasn't loud. It was a soft, deadly promise. Bradley's smug demeanor completely evaporated. He turned pale, stammered something unintelligible, and practically sprinted out of the lounge, the heavy doors clicking shut behind him. Penelope immediately jumped back from Matteo as if she had been burned, gasping for air. "Oh my God. I am so sorry. Mr. DeLuca, I didn't mean to touch you, I just panicked. He always does this. I'll waive your entire hotel bill. Matteo raised a large hand, stopping her frantic rambling. He looked at her, truly looked at her. He didn't see the fat, pathetic woman Bradley tried to paint her as. He saw a beautiful woman with soft, striking features, intelligent eyes, and a loyalty to her family that kept her enduring abuse. But more importantly, he saw an opportunity. Currently, FBI agent Robert Harrison was aggressively building a RICO case against the DeLuca family. Matteo needed a distraction. He needed to present the image of a reformed, grounded businessman. A sudden, secret marriage to a respectable, civilian woman, a hotel manager with no criminal ties, would throw the feds into absolute chaos, derailing their narrative of him as an unstable, violent mobster. "Penelope," Matteo said, tasting her name on his tongue. "You need a husband for your sister's wedding to save face." Yes, but I was just desperate. You don't have to—" "No, I will do it," Matteo interrupted calmly, stepping into her personal space. The scent of cedar and expensive cologne enveloped her. "But I need something in return. We are going to make this very real. For the next 3 months, you are Mrs. DeLuca. You will live in my penthouse. You will attend public galas on my arm. You will be my alibi." Penelope stared at him, her heart doing a frantic dance. "You want me to fake marry a mob boss?" Matteo supplied with a smirk. "Yes. I give you protection and the ultimate revenge on your ex. You give me a shield from the federal government. Do we have a deal?" Penelope looked at the door where Bradley had just fled. She thought of the years of crying in fitting rooms, the diets that broke her spirit, the constant feeling of never being enough. Then she looked at the towering, dangerous man in front of her, who hadn't hesitated to defend her. "Deal," she whispered. The next 72 hours were a whirlwind of terrifying luxury. Penelope moved out of her modest apartment in Logan Square and into Matteo's sprawling, high-security penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. There were bodyguards at the doors, encrypted phones, and a level of wealth she had only ever seen while catering for billionaires. But the most shocking part was Matteo himself. He didn't treat the arrangement like a cold business transaction. When Penelope tried to hide her figure in a loose, black, shapeless dress for their first outing, Matteo had stopped her in the hallway. "Why are you wearing a tent, Penelope?" he asked, his brow furrowed. "It's slimming," she muttered, looking at her shoes. "Bradley always said black hides the bulk." A dark, dangerous shadow crossed Matteo's face at the mention of her ex's name. Without a word, he made a phone call. 2 hours later, a private stylist arrived from Oscar de la Renta with racks of custom gowns. Matteo sat on the velvet sofa, sipping whiskey, personally overseeing the fitting. He forbade black. He demanded jewel tones, emerald greens, deep sapphires, rich burgundies. When Penelope stepped out in a tailored, off-the-shoulder emerald gown that hugged her heavy curves, cinched her waist, and flowed elegantly to the floor, she felt entirely exposed. She wrapped her arms around her stomach. Matteo stood up, walking slowly toward her. He gently pulled her arms away from her body. "You have nothing to hide," he murmured, his thumb brushing over her bare shoulder, sending a shock wave of electricity straight to her core. "You are magnificent. Let them look, and let them burn with envy." For the first time in her life, Penelope felt genuinely beautiful. Saturday arrived. Madison's wedding was a lavish affair, held at the Chicago Botanic Garden. Penelope arrived on Matteo's arm, stepping out of a bulletproof Maybach. The moment they walked into the reception tent, the room's atmosphere shifted. Penelope, usually the wallflower, commanded every eye. The emerald dress was a showstopper. Her makeup was flawless, and on her left hand rested a 5-carat cushion-cut diamond that Matteo had slipped on her finger in the car. But it was the man beside her that caused the real stir. Matteo De Luca radiated danger and power. He kept a possessive hand on the small of Penelope's back, guiding her through the crowd with the grace of a panther. Bradley was standing by the champagne tower when he saw them. The glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the polished dance floor. A true predator doesn't bark. He simply claims his territory and waits for the fools to step out of line. Throughout dinner, Penelope's family was in a state of stunned disbelief. Her mother, a woman who usually nagged Penelope about carbohydrates, was entirely charmed and terrified by Matteo. Matteo played the role of the obsessed newlywed perfectly. He kissed Penelope's knuckles, pulled her chair out, and fed her a strawberry from his dessert plate, with a gaze so intense it made Penelope forget they were pretending. Eventually, Bradley couldn't take the hit to his ego. As Penelope went to the bar to get a glass of water, Bradley cornered her. "I don't know how much you're paying this actor, Penny," Bradley hissed, his face red with cheap wine and jealousy. "But it's pathetic. A guy who looks like that doesn't marry a fat girl who can't even push herself away from the table. It's a joke." Before Penelope could even process the familiar sting of his words, a large, heavy hand clamped onto the back of Bradley's neck. Matteo didn't shout. He leaned in, pressing Bradley face first onto the mahogany bar, shattering the ice bowl in the process. The music in the tent seemed to fade into a dull hum as the surrounding guests gasped. "I told you what would happen if you disrespected my wife again," Matteo whispered into Bradley's ear, his voice a lethal hiss. "Every curve on her body belongs to me. She is a queen, and you are a pathetic, insecure little boy who is currently breathing my air." Matteo applied pressure, and Bradley let out a pathetic whimper of pain. "Apologize to her," Matteo commanded. "Now." I'm sorry. Penny, I'm sorry," Bradley gasped, crying openly in front of the entire wedding party. Matteo released him in disgust, pulling out a silk handkerchief to wipe his hand, as if touching Bradley had soiled him. He turned to Penelope, his eyes instantly softening, and offered his arm. "Shall we dance, Mia Mowgli?" Penelope, shaking with adrenaline and a strange, intoxicating thrill, took his hand. As they swayed to the music in the center of the floor, she looked up at him. "You didn't have to go that far." "I will always go that far for you," Matteo replied, his hand resting firmly on her hip. It felt like a fairy tale, a dark, twisted, beautiful fairy tale. But fairy tales in the Mafia don't last without bloodshed. Just as the DJ transitioned to an upbeat song, the heavy canvas doors of the reception tent were suddenly ripped open. The popping sound didn't register as gunfire to Penelope at first. She thought it was fireworks. But when the ornate floral centerpiece on the table next to them exploded into shrapnel, the screaming began. 3 men in tactical gear, bearing the tattoos of the rival Romanov syndicate, breached the tent. The illusion of the fake marriage instantly shattered. This wasn't a game anymore. Matteo didn't hesitate. He didn't dive for cover alone. He tackled Penelope to the ground, shielding her heavy frame completely with his own massive body as a hail of bullets tore through the idyllic wedding reception. "Stay down!" Matteo roared, drawing a sleek black firearm from an ankle holster Penelope hadn't even known was there. She looked up at him, terrified, realizing with absolute certainty that this dangerous, terrifying mob boss wasn't just pretending anymore. He was prepared to die for her. The deafening roar of automatic gunfire shattered the idyllic elegance of the Chicago Botanic Garden. Screams tore through the white canvas of the reception tent as crystal glasses shattered and tables were overturned in a desperate frenzy for cover. Penelope lay pinned beneath the crushing, solid weight of Matteo De Luca. His massive frame covered her entirely, shielding her soft, vulnerable body with his own. The scent of gunpowder instantly overpowered the delicate fragrance of the imported white roses. Matteo's movements were terrifyingly precise, devoid of the panic that gripped the wedding guests. With his left arm keeping Penelope firmly pressed to the floorboards, his right hand gripped a sleek Glock 19. He fired 3 consecutive deafening shots toward the entrance. A heavy thud followed as one of the masked Romanov syndicate hitters hit the ground, his assault rifle skittering across the dance floor. "Leo!" Matteo roared, his voice a commanding baritone that cut through the chaos. From the periphery of the tent, Matteo's head of security, a heavily scarred man named Leo, emerged from the screaming crowd. He laid down a suppressing barrage of fire, forcing the remaining 2 Romanov hitmen to dive behind the shattered remnants of the champagne tower. "We move now," Matteo commanded, his breath hot against Penelope's ear. He didn't ask if she was okay. He didn't have the luxury of time. He grabbed her hand, his grip iron-tight but protective. "Stay low. Do not look back, Penelope. Just run with me." Penelope's heart battered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Her heavy, emerald gown, which had made her feel like a queen just moments prior, now felt like a weighted anchor. But adrenaline is a miraculous fuel. Pushing her heels off, she scrambled to her feet, her bare soles gripping the polished wood floor. Matteo kept himself positioned between her and the line of fire, effectively offering his own back as a shield to protect her. They sprinted out the rear flap of the tent, plunging into the cool, dark humidity of the botanical gardens. The chaotic noise of the reception faded into muffled pops as they navigated the labyrinth of manicured hedges. Waiting idling on the gravel access road was a heavily armored black Chevrolet Suburban. Leo threw the rear passenger door open. Matteo practically shoved Penelope inside before diving in after her. "Drive. Lake Forest Safe House," Matteo barked as the heavy ballistic doors slammed shut. The SUV tore off, tires throwing gravel into the night air as they sped away from the sirens wailing in the distance. Inside the dark, quiet cabin, Penelope was hyperventilating. Her hands shook violently as she wiped dirt and wood splinters from her face. It was only when the streetlights illuminated the interior of the SUV that she saw the dark, spreading stain on Matteo's left shoulder. It was ruining the immaculate tailoring of his Brioni jacket. "You're shot!" Penelope gasped, her previous panic instantly dissolving into a raw, primal concern for the man beside her. She reached out, her trembling fingers hovering over the wound. "It is a graze," Matteo said, his voice entirely too calm for a man bleeding onto expensive leather. He leaned his head back against the seat, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "Are you hurt? Did they touch you?" "No, I'm fine, but you're bleeding!" Without thinking, Penelope grabbed the excess fabric of her expensive, custom-made emerald gown. With a sharp tug, she ripped a long strip of the heavy silk from the hem, bunching it up and pressing it firmly against Matteo's bleeding shoulder. Matteo hissed as the pressure was applied, but his gaze never left her face. He didn't look at the ruined dress. He looked at the fierce determination in the eyes of the woman treating him. In his brutal world, people either froze or betrayed you when the bullets started flying. Penelope, a civilian woman who had been bullied and belittled her entire life for her physical size, was currently holding pressure on a gunshot wound with the steady composure of a battlefield medic. "You are ruining a $5,000 dress," Matteo murmured, a faint, dark smirk playing on his lips despite the pain. "I'll put it on your hotel tab," Penelope shot back, tears finally spilling over her eyelashes as the sheer terror of the night caught up to her. "Who were they, Matteo? Why did they shoot up my sister's wedding?" "The Romanov Syndicate," Matteo replied, the amusement fading from his face, replaced by a cold, murderous resolve. "They are a rival faction operating out of the South Side. They have been trying to encroach on my shipping operations. But tonight was a mistake. They targeted a civilian event. They targeted my wife." "I'm not really your wife," Penelope whispered, her voice breaking. The reminder of their fake arrangement felt incredibly painful at that moment. Matteo reached up with his uninjured right hand, his rough thumb gently wiping a tear from her cheek. "You wore my ring. You stood by my side. In my world, Penelope, that makes you mine to protect. And I will burn the city of Chicago to ash before I let anyone harm a single hair on your head." They arrived at the Lake Forest estate, an imposing stone mansion, heavily guarded by armed men, patrolling the perimeter. Inside, a discreet underground medical suite awaited them. Dr. Evans, a physician on the DeLuca payroll, quickly stitched Matteo's shoulder. Penelope refused to leave the room, sitting quietly in a leather armchair, her ruined dress pooling around her bare feet. Once the doctor departed, and they were left alone in the dimly lit master bedroom, the heavy silence returned. Matteo, now wearing a simple black t-shirt that stretched over his muscular chest, walked over to the sprawling king-sized bed and sat down. He patted the space next to him. Penelope hesitated. She felt incredibly self-conscious. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving her painfully aware of her disheveled appearance and her heavy curves that she usually tried so desperately to hide. But Matteo's gaze held no judgment, only an intense, burning hunger that made her breath hitch. She walked over and sat beside him, leaving a safe foot of space between them. Matteo immediately closed that distance, wrapping his uninjured arm around her thick waist and pulling her flush against his side. "Bradley," Matteo said suddenly, the name tasting like poison on his tongue. Penelope flinched. "What about him?" "The Romanovs needed to know exactly where I would be tonight, and at what time. I am a very difficult man to track. My schedule is classified. The only people who knew I would be standing by the champagne tower at 9 p.m. were the wedding guests." Matteo's voice was deathly calm. Leo checked the security footage from the venue. 10 minutes before the attack, Bradley slipped out the back. He made a phone call. Penelope felt the blood drain from her face. You think Bradley tipped them off? Because you embarrassed him. He's a corporate lawyer, Matteo. He's a jerk, but he's not involved with the Mafia. He is a coward with a bruised ego, Matteo corrected harshly. And cowards do desperate things when a real man puts them in their place. He sold my location to Dmitry Romanov for revenge. He didn't care that you were standing right next to me. He didn't care that his own brother was the groom. He put you in the crosshairs, Penelope. A cold, hollow realization settled in Penelope's chest. The man she had once loved, the man who had destroyed her self-esteem over her weight, had actually been willing to let her die just to get back at the man defending her. "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice trembling. Matteo turned her slightly, forcing her to look directly into his dark, ruthless eyes. "I am going to dismantle his life. But before I do that, I need to know something." He reached down, his large hands gently cupping her soft, full hips, pulling her into his lap. Penelope gasped at the intimate contact, but she didn't pull away. "I need to know if you still hold any affection for him," Matteo demanded softly. "Because if there is even a fraction of your heart that still belongs to that pathetic insect, I will let him live. If not, I will destroy him." Penelope looked at Matteo. She saw the danger, the violence, the absolute authority. But she also saw the man who had ordered a custom dress to make her feel beautiful, the man who had shielded her with his own body, the man who looked at her size 20 figure like it was the most magnificent thing he had ever laid eyes on. "I feel absolutely nothing for him," Penelope breathed out, the truth setting her completely free. "I haven't for a long time." Matteo let out a low, predatory growl. He leaned in, capturing her lips in a searing, possessive kiss. It wasn't gentle. It was a claiming. Penelope melted against him, her hands tangling in his dark hair, entirely consumed by the fierce, protective heat of the Mafia boss who was no longer pretending to be her husband. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in psychological warfare. FBI agent Robert Harrison had been working the DeLuca RICO case for 3 years. He had finally secured a wiretap warrant for Matteo's known associates. But the wedding shootout changed the entire landscape. Harrison thought he had the perfect leverage to bring Matteo in. Instead, he walked into a completely different trap. Matteo didn't just kill Bradley. That would have been too easy, and it would have drawn the FBI straight to his door. Instead, Matteo used his vast, legitimate real estate empire to orchestrate a financial bloodbath. Bradley worked as a partner at Kirkland & Ellis. Within 48 hours of the wedding, 3 of the firm's largest corporate clients, all secretly controlled by shell companies owned by the DeLuca syndicate, pulled their multi-million-dollar retainers. They explicitly cited Bradley's unethical personal behavior as the cause. Bradley was instantly fired, stripped of his partnership, and blacklisted from every major law firm in Chicago. But Matteo wasn't finished. He forwarded the undeniable proof of Bradley's phone call to the Romanov syndicate directly to FBI agent Harrison through an anonymous proxy. The feds, desperate for a win after the very public Botanical Garden shootout, immediately pivoted their focus. They arrested Bradley in his downtown condo on charges of conspiracy to commit murder and racketeering. Bradley, crying and begging, was hauled away in handcuffs in front of the local news cameras. Penelope watched the news broadcast from the massive flat screen in Matteo's Lake Forest living room. She wore a soft, luxurious cashmere robe, holding a mug of tea. She felt a profound sense of closure. The man who had terrorized her self-worth for years was completely ruined, exposed to the world as the pathetic, vindictive coward he truly was. Do you pity him? Matteo stepped into the room, dressed in a sharp charcoal suit, looking every inch the untouchable kingpin he was. He walked over and stood behind her chair, his large hands gently massaging her tense shoulders. No, Penelope said honestly, leaning back into his strong touch. I don't feel anything for him at all. Just relief. Matteo leaned down, pressing a lingering kiss to the crown of her head. Good. Because tomorrow we are leaving Chicago. Penelope turned around, surprised. Leaving? To where? Sicily, Matteo replied, his dark eyes softening as he looked down at her. The FBI is occupied with your ex-fiancé and the Romanovs. The heat is off my family for the foreseeable future. Our arrangement, the fake marriage to keep the feds confused, has served its purpose. A sudden, sharp pain pierced Penelope's chest. The 3-month deal. She had almost forgotten. The shootout, the shared bed, the passionate nights they had spent together since the wedding. She had stupidly allowed herself to believe it was real. But to Matteo, it was just business. It was time for her to go back to her normal, boring life. She stood up, pulling the robe tighter around her full figure, suddenly feeling very vulnerable. Oh, I understand. I'll pack my things and head back to Logan Square. You won't have to worry about me talking to the authorities, Matteo. I owe you my life. Matteo frowned, his dark brows knitting together in genuine confusion. He closed the distance between them in 2 long strides, grabbing her soft upper arms. What are you talking about? You are not going to Logan Square. You just said the arrangement served its purpose, Penelope argued, fighting the tears welling in her eyes. The fake marriage is over. Yes, it is, Matteo stated firmly. He let go of her arms, reaching into the inner pocket of his suit jacket. He pulled out a small, black velvet box. Penelope stopped breathing. Matteo De Luca, the ruthless, terrifying boss of the Chicago underworld, dropped down onto one knee in the center of his multi-million-dollar living room. He opened the box, revealing a breathtaking, flawless 10-carat emerald-cut diamond ring that put the fake engagement ring to absolute shame. The fake marriage is over, Penelope, Matteo said, his voice thick with raw, unfiltered emotion. Because I refuse to pretend anymore. From the moment you grabbed my arm in that hotel and looked at me with those beautiful, desperate eyes, you sealed your fate. You are brilliant, you are brave, and you are the most stunningly beautiful woman I have ever known. I do not want a business deal. I want a wife. Tears streamed freely down Penelope's face. She looked at the man on his knee, the man who had never once asked her to change, who worshipped every curve of her body and protected her with lethal devotion. I love you, Matteo vowed, looking up at her with absolute certainty. Marry me for real. Come to Sicily with me. Stand by my side, and let me spend the rest of my life proving to you that you are a queen. Forever. Penelope didn't hesitate. She didn't think about the danger, or the underworld, or the crazy logic of it all. She only thought about the fierce, unconditional love radiating from the man in front of her. Forever, Penelope sobbed, throwing her arms around his neck as he stood up to catch her. Matteo crushed her against his chest, sliding the massive diamond onto her finger, sealing a vow that the underworld would come to respect and fear for decades to come. Penelope De Luca was no longer a victim. She was the untouchable matriarch of a criminal empire, fiercely loved, fiercely protected, and absolutely perfect exactly as she was. Did Penelope and Matteo's dangerous romance leave you completely breathless? Love this thrilling journey from a fake arrangement to a fiercely protective, real Mafia marriage. If you want more intense, heart-stopping romance stories featuring strong, relatable heroines and the ruthless men who worship them, don't forget to hit that like button. Share this incredible video with your fellow romance lovers, and make sure to subscribe to our channel for more epic audio stories. Your next obsession is waiting for you.